Okay, so I am here today with Dominik Diamond. Dominik, how you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Adam.
Good, fantastic. This one's kind of, it's going to be interesting for me because obviously I'm part of a generation that grew up seeing you on TV on a show called GamesMaster, and I'm very excited to have you on, so this is fantastic. My first question would be, for anybody that doesn't know GamesMaster or know your career, so I guess it's a two-part question, how would you describe GamesMaster and how would you describe your career overall?
GamesMaster was the first video games TV show, I think possibly in the world, certainly in the UK, the first of its kind to be like a mass market success. So yeah, and the show basically took video games and tried to make them a genuine piece of entertainment that people could watch. Ironic, given that the huge explosion of esports now, that basically we did esports back in the 90s with celebrity guests and members of the public doing challenges and sprinkled with features and tips and everything like that. But we tried to make it a little bit weird in that we had these quite insane settings for each series. They would range from an oil rig, a church, heaven, hell, a deserted island. So and if people think that sounds a bit strange, it was very strange, but it was also luckily for me very successful. And since then, I basically just tried to hang on to a media career and keep making money. I moved into radio, did radio for a long time in the UK, and then moved to Canada to retire. Ran out of money, so I started back in radio again. The end.
Wow. Okay. And, you know, I guess for me, because I wrote an article about what your show now on Twitch, which we'll talk about later. But the thing I find interesting is really GamesMaster was a fusion of many things, right? It was kind of like the technology was there, and then there was kind of, you know, the youth culture of the time as well. Growing up for you, what was your earliest memories of technology?
Do you know what's interesting? For a long time, I kept thinking that the ZX Spectrum was the first games machine that we ever had as a family. But I literally just remembered a couple of days ago, we had this thing before it, and I wish I could remember the name. It was like a Binatone console, but it was like a knockoff version of that plugged into a black and white TV we had, and you had Pong, and then you had a couple of variations on Pong. There was one called Soccer that basically had like a little goal gap at the end and two pads going up and down. You had Hockey, two pads going up and down with like a goal, the ball could go behind, and there was a weird kind of like duck hunt style game on it. And and that must have been 1976, maybe.
Oh, wow.
1977. Okay. So, that was the first. And it was just, it was just mind blowing. It really was to just have, and I mean, I was the world's biggest Action Man fan. And I don't think I ever touched an Action Man the day we got that machine onwards.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you know, did you, up to GamesMaster, did you carry on like playing video games, or was GamesMaster the thing that kind of got you back into the scene?
I'd played. I was into arcade games.
Yeah.
We had some great arcade games at Bristol University. I can't never remember. It was like a futuristic American football game that I used to play all the time. But yeah, where I grew up in Arbroath, a small fishing town on the east coast of Scotland, it had a fairground in the town, and part of that was a huge, big covered arcade section. So throughout my childhood, as well as the Spectrum, and into my teenage years, I was just, massive arcade games player.
Wow. And I guess on the other side of it, because, if anybody hasn't seen GamesMaster, go over to YouTube, you can find all of them. The big part of it was the way you presented humor and the way you packaged things around humor. What was your comedy influences growing up?
Billy Connolly.
Yeah. Okay.
Billy Connolly, the absolute greatest. And I think it's like, I think what I loved about Billy Connolly was that he wasn't just a straight joke teller. He told stories. He told stories that just had lots and lots of funny lines in it. And he was naughty. And I liked the way that that Billy Connolly was able to swear and to say rude stuff and sexual stuff, but he did it with like a cheeky wink and a smile, and it was never aggressive, it was never nasty, it was never mean, it was just cheeky.
Yep.
And I think that definitely shaped the attitude that I brought to GamesMaster, and that there was a lot of stuff there that was quite was very adult content, but couched in the form of double entendres. But I think that we got away with it because it was always cheeky. I think cheeky is a good word to describe it.
Yeah, and as sort of like part of the youth audience at the time, it extended beyond, I think, its intentional audience, and you ended up quite a lot of adults actually watched it as well, particularly late teens and early 20s. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, I think that's you wouldn't be able to have like 3 million TV viewers if it was just a kids' TV show. No, we got those viewers because word got around that there was this show, and it was a little bit naughty.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, very much an adult audience as well.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned the University of Bristol. Now you and I share that alma mater. I went to Bristol as well. What are your most memorable sort of like things from that period of your life? Because obviously you were in the same class as David Walliams and Simon Pegg and stuff like that, but what was it about Bristol at that time that really had this sort of vibe, by the sounds of it, from what you've described previously?
I don't know. I think, like, in terms of what kind of shaped me at that time, was poverty, basically. I remember just the sheer poverty of those years of having absolutely no money at all. And what I used to do was I would take my student grant and basically spend it all on slot machines in pubs. It was the first of many horrible addictions in my life. So I literally remember just being so poor and not being able to do anything. But luckily, because I did drama, and because then all I wanted to do was just act. There was just so many plays. All I basically did at Bristol was appear in a play, and then another play, and then another play, and then another play, and then tried to do a bit of work for my degree on the side. But it was, it was a really, what was interesting about Bristol was that even though you had the Department of Drama, which then was, the most prestigious drama course in the country, but actually all the really kind of cool creative theatre stuff was done by people outside the drama department, the student union plays, and everything from mass market musicals to kind of to avant-garde stuff. So it really was it was a great time. What made that particular group of people? I'll tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't anything to do with the teaching there, for a start. I would like to say, oh yeah, we had these great lecturers there that inspired me and Simon and David and that. But no, I think we just inspired each other. I think that we were, there was a lot of very funny, very creative people who just really wanted to kind of do things and collaborate with each other. And it was just one of those things,
Yeah. And what do you think makes Bristol a great media town? Because it's a very strong media town. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Sorry. I don't know. I mean, there's, some people say that there's a really bizarre vibe in Bristol because it was a slavery town.
Yeah.
And there's apparently all these ghosts and everything underneath the Bristol, one of the most haunted places. Yeah. So I think that there's something about the energy in towns that have got a long history and sometimes not a particularly nice side of history, that all these things, kind of end up seeping into the walls. It's interesting. It's a really interesting place.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me a little bit more about your David Icke troupe, because I was very interested in that when I was researching this. So
yeah, that was it. So I basically, I was doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
It was they used to have a thing every year, the studio space cabaret in the drama department, and everybody would get up and do a turn, but you didn't get up if you were a first year, right? That was verboten. But I did a couple of drinks and I was a natural show off. So I got up in the first year and just did some stand-up, half of which was just completely verbatim stolen from Billy Connolly, and the other half was just my own kind of stuff about buying condoms. And so I got up and did that, and it went okay. So that started me down that path, and I did bits and pieces of stand-up comedy. And then it wasn't until again, poverty. I mean, I was absolutely skint. I was always trying to think of ways to make money. And I thought, right, okay, why don't I run my own comedy club instead of me turning up to these other places and doing it for like, 20 quid or whatever? Why don't I run my own? And I said, well, there's obviously David's funny, Simon's funny. There was a couple of other people as well. And so I said to them, look, do you want to get together and actually do a weekly comedy review thing? And I'll MC it. You guys, get your own little 15, 20 minutes, whatever each week. And yeah, so we did that in the Dome Cafe in Bristol. And they, I actually found the other day, sorting through stuff, I found my financial report from that each week that I would hand out. And it literally was, I think Simon and David and all the performers ended up getting £14. And I got £14 as a performer. And then I got another £14 for running the whole thing. So I got twice as much as everyone else. But it was a really great thing. There was one video of it that I had somewhere, and it was terrible quality and low grain and everything. But again, I can't find it, and it's such a shame because, Simon in particular was absolutely off the scale, incredible, just like an absolute comic genius, which he still is.
Well, hopefully you find that somewhere, because you could upscale that now. You could probably get it looking decent. So
I think you underestimate just how grainy and bad it was.
Yeah. Now, another thing that we share, because we'll go back on to GamesMaster in a minute, but I wanted to kind of talk to you about this, is a love of the Manic Street Preachers. We both actually like the early period of the Manics. Now, what are your memories of the Manics? Because, particularly those first two albums, some of the videos were incredible from like a, imagery point of view, but you actually had the opportunity to meet them and hang out with them, right?
Yeah, I did. The early 90s was just basically me following Manic Street Preachers around like a lovesick puppy.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And it was, it all started when how did I get in? I think it was those kind of classic early NME interviews with Richie carving four-wheel into his arm and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a band that are really serious about their stuff. And then so I kind of started buying their stuff. And then when I started writing for Smash Hits, I used to mention them in my Smash Hits video games column. I used to drag them in, kicking and screaming wherever I could. So then they heard about that. And then that's when I ended up meeting them for the first time, was interviewing them for Smash Hits. And that was just the scariest but most brilliant, wonderful experience of my life. And I went for a drink afterwards with them, and then I just kind of stayed in touch. And so amazing things would happen, like I get a call saying, okay, do you want to see the Manics in the rehearsal studio doing songs from Gold Against the Soul, which hadn't even been out yet.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah. So I went along. And also what was good, there was a guy, Richard Easter, who was worked for the Steve Wright Show on BBC Radio 1 at the time. And he was a big fan as well. So we would kind of both go along to see them whenever we could. And so me and him ended up being there, literally sitting cross-legged on the floor at the feet of the Manics, like literally 2 feet away as they played some of the songs from Gold Against the Soul. So things like that was amazing. And I remember once Cliff's Pavilion in Southend Cliff's Pavilion gig, where I remember being on the bus with them, going back to their hotel afterwards, sitting talking with Richie about Lord Lucan. And he was obsessed with Lord Lucan and how he'd managed to disappear. And it was really weird then. I always think about that when I think about Richie's disappearance and the conspiracy theory that he faked it and he's alive on some island somewhere. And I think, well, he was obsessed with people who had disappeared. So, but they were amazing people. I mean, I thought that they were so lovely and so amazingly kind to me. And I thought that, Richie was just, for someone who was he was physically so small, but had such a gargantuan charisma and personality. He was small, he was very quiet, but he would walk into a room and just the whole room would just kind of seem to freeze, and you would just like Richie was lit by his own personal spotlight. He really was He was a remarkable person.
Wow.
And they all were. They're all absolutely amazing.
Yeah. I mean, what was the dynamic like as a 4-piece? Because I only ever seen them as a 3-piece for the Everything Must Go tour. What was the personalities like?
Well, this is what's interesting was because on stage, Richie did nothing. I mean, they famously, they had his guitar was turned really low down because he was not a musician. He was an incredible writer.
Yeah.
But, he was not a great guitarist or anything. So it didn't really sonically make any difference to the live performance. But again, just him on that stage, that was that incredible contrast to someone who musically contributed very little to the band, but yet on stage was such an enormous, just such a cool presence.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you ever look at the Holy Bible sort of sleeve. Like you look at that and all the stuff that he did for the imagery, it's just incredible. It's like one of the few albums where it's part of the story of the album. It's just crazy.
Oh, he was an artist.
Yeah.
I mean, Richie was a genuine artist. What he could do with words and images was truly incredible. And I think, I think it is absolutely amazing that how the Manics went on to become even bigger afterwards.
Yeah,
that they carried on going. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if they should keep going. But they did and became this massive arena band, which was great.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because I was listening to Everything Must Go recently, and it's amazing how much of a blend it is of their old and their new life. In a way, it really is a crossroads album. It's kind of crazy how much they nailed it. So, yeah, absolutely. So, my friends, Dan and Ravi, you were on their podcast, The Retro Hour, and you mentioned on that you had more control once you left and then came back to GamesMaster, because for anybody that doesn't know, season 1 and 2 you were there, season 3 weren't there, didn't go so well for them, brought you back. How do you think there is a separation for you between 1 and 2 and 4 and is it 7 or 8? 7, is it? 1, 4 to 7.
1 and 2, then I left, and then 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah. I always think there's 8 because it finished in 98. So yeah. So yeah. So is there a separation for you? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. In terms of my own personal enjoyment, I didn't enjoy series 1 or series 2. I think series 1, I was just so nervous and I had no idea if it was going to work or not. I all of a sudden been given this incredible once in a lifetime opportunity. And it was just like, is this going to be a failure? And I'll have this chance and then that'll be it. And I'll never be able to do this job again. So I was too nervous about it. Season 2, and I know it sounds horribly kind of superficial, but I hated the way I looked. I couldn't even watch season 2 because of the red jacket. I just thought that I looked just ridiculous. And that coincided with the explosion of the show and the idea that there was 3 million people seeing me look like a twat. And it did, and so it robbed any kind of enjoyment I had of series 2. So yeah, so for me, I think that the show was definitely more left field from season 4 onwards, and partly because I had a bigger say in things, but also I think because success breeds success, and then what we were like there was no way that we were ever going to get cancelled by that stage, so we could kind of take more risks with stuff. But I certainly enjoyed it a lot more. I was certainly much more kind of comfortable. I mean, I don't like doing TV.
Interesting.
I don't like making it at all because it is such a long, laborious, drawn out process. Setting up cameras, getting makeup, worrying about how you look. It just takes forever. And that's how I've always been much happier doing live radio, where you think of something, you say it, that's it. So I never really enjoyed the TV process, and certainly not when I felt that I personally looked ridiculous. So from season 4 onwards, I'm definitely a lot happier.
Wow. Okay. And how do you, this is obviously hypothetical and you may not have an answer for it, but how do you think season 3 would have looked if you stayed?
I think that it's difficult because I literally watched 60 seconds of season 3. Wow. I watched the first 60 seconds, saw Dexter holding up the red jacket, this bloke's burnt out, and I'm like, oh, you fucking arseholes. And then so that was it. Yeah. And I didn't watch any more of that. But the prison setting, that seems to be a great setting. I don't think we would have changed that. So I don't think it would have been that much more different. I think it would just, it would have had a different presenter. It would have been a bit less Cockney and more Scottish.
Yeah. Bit more
but
Billy.
I think their concept was sound, and it was a really good one.
Okay. And for basically, it's an interesting show for a number of reasons, because you have people like Julian Rignall and Frank O'Connor, who now went on, and Frank's now working on the Halo series, and Julian had a massive career in San Francisco. What do you think about that sort of period whereby you have press journalists from the gaming industry crossing over into the actual gaming industry itself? Do you think it captures the mood of the time where there was this market that was just about to go boom? Or what's your sort of view on that?
I think that they were just incredibly smart people who made really good decisions. I mean, poacher turned gamekeeper is a fantastic thing to do if you ever kind of get the chance. And I mean, obviously they love video games, but it's if you love video games, it's a much more fulfilling role playing a part in creating them, as opposed to dissecting them and taking them apart, which is the whole nature of game journalism. Is it that? I mean, now and again you get a great game to review, but I would say the vast majority of times is you actually picking them apart and criticizing them. And I wish I'd done something like that. I wish so much that, like at that, like in the late 90s when GamesMaster was ending, I wish I'd started working for Sega or Sony or something like that. Holy shit, the money, and it's interesting. And I don't think I've ever spoken about this. I don't think many people know this. When I first went to Canada, I nearly ended up working for a video games company, HB Studios in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, who over the years have done assorted versions of Madden and FIFA and golf games for EA, right? They are based in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. A guy called Jeremy Wellard, who used to work for Codemasters back in the UK, he set it up. And I had just so basically we moved to Nova Scotia, midlife crisis. Instead of buying a Harley Davidson, I bought a llama farm, and but the llamas had all disappeared by the time I got there, and it was a bit of a financial disaster. So we ran out of money in a year, and I had to start working, doing the only thing I knew, which was the media. So I started in radio, smallest radio station in Nova Scotia. And then I lost my job there because of cutbacks. And at that time, I played football with a guy called Scouse Keith, who worked for HB Studios.
What a great name.
And so he said to me, we're looking for a producer at HB for our next rugby game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I applied for the job. I did the most ridiculously detailed breakdown of what I would do with their next rugby union game. And I had an interview all lined up.
Oh, wow.
And then I got a call from a random guy who worked for another radio station in Nova Scotia, who I'd met because I used to do a bit of folk singing, and he'd seen me performing. And he got in touch with me. Darren Harvey, his name is. And he said, look, I heard you lost your job at CKBW. He said, Steve Jones is a massive fan of yours. Steve Jones is one of the biggest players in radio in Canada. And for some reason, he'd heard me on this tiny little radio station.
Wow.
Darren has said, he really loves you. Get in touch with him. So I got in touch with him, and I met with him. And he said, you're the most original voice I've heard on the radio in Canada for years. Come and work for me. So I never even made the interview for HB Studios. So I nearly did it, and I possibly wish I had done it now.
There's still time. There's always still time.
But then again, it's interesting though, actually, Adam, because I remember Keith saying at the time to me, be prepared for how boring it is. He said, you're lucky. You've always been at the exciting end of the games industry. Yeah. Playing the finished products and talking about them and everything. But the actual hard slog day-to-day of producing a video game and, all the testing and all the error searching and everything, he said it really is very slow and it can be very boring. So I'm not sure if I would have liked it.
Yeah. And that kind of feeds into the next question I wanted to ask you, which was, it was such a fast-paced industry in the 90s. So much changed in such a short period of time. How would you describe what you were covering in the video game industry when you started in 92? And how would you describe it by the time GamesMaster finished in 98?
I think when we started, it was very much a new thing, a new genre of entertainment, and as a result, it was very kind of underdog, scrappy, bolshy, and very cool. And by the end of GamesMaster, it had actually gone over to the other side, and instead of just being a new, exciting, scrappy entertainment genre, it was the entertainment genre on the planet. And that, I think that the 90s were in the last kind of great era for video games, because afterwards the sheer scale of money involved meant that it all got very corporate, and then things like microtransactions and everything came, and it became too much like a business. All those amazing things, when you think about great stunts that like Sega did, were just brilliant. Their whole marketing department was just so punk. I mean, it really was punk rock. And then they would end up with things like, Sonic the Hedgehog being on the front cover of like the Face magazine, when previously it had just been like, like pop stars and everything. That stuff was incredible. But I think by the end of GamesMaster, it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you should say that, because I mean, even dipping into season 2 briefly, when I was writing the article that I published about your Twitch show, was the surrealness of having a deep sea diver and 3 arm wrestlers with a guy dressed like a Butlins Redcoat. Just that scene in itself. Do you know what I mean? It's like, could you get away with that today? Would people translate to that?
I know.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is as well that was very interesting, looking at those early seasons to the end, is the show also charts the sort of development of the home internet, right? Because in season 1, you're talking about at the end, like phone in. Then by season 4, you're saying dial in on your modem. And then by the end, you're showing people like playing on PCs, and this is the Channel 4 website. I thought that was really interesting as well,
Do you know, that's really interesting. I'd never thought about it in that way before. But see, again, we had everybody talks rightly about Jane Hewland, the boss of GamesMaster. But Jane had a business partner called Hillary, who was ludicrously smart and good at what she did. So all those things, anytime there was any way of like harnessing any new technology for interaction with the show, or more importantly for money, like we had the GamesMaster Club and everything, she was behind that. So I think, and nobody ever mentions Hillary, probably because she was a tough woman. She was not, the nicest thing I'd say is that she wasn't the most pleasant. She was a hard human being, and was fucking terrifying. But nobody mentions Hillary ever. You'll never hear Hillary mentioned in any article about GamesMaster ever. But I think she that side of it that you're talking about, I think that was her. She was very much a driving part of all that way we harness new technology.
That's incredible. Wow. And you mentioned llamas earlier, and I've got to ask you, do you have any Jeff Minter memories at all?
No, do you know what? See, this is the thing as well, was that I've caught myself so many times about to lie and claim that I loved all Jeff Minter's games, because that's just the coolest thing you can do. And I would know, I was not nearly as cool as that. My games was like, Match Day and Football Manager and things like that, were really, and elite games. No, I was just a big mass market top 10 popular straight game slut back then. I wasn't kind of woke or anything.
It's all right. They're all worth money now. It doesn't matter. They're all worth money. So, you moved to Canada. You have a long period of experience in British media. And obviously it sounds as though you didn't intend to go into the media in Canada. How would you describe the differences between working in the media in the UK and working in the media in a larger landmass like Canada, from a small island to a big landmass?
I think there's much less backstabbing in the media in Canada. People are much nicer and much more supportive. Like, for example, in the UK, if you will slag off a rival radio station, right? You'll hammer the guys on it. Canada, oh my God. First couple of times I tried that. What are you doing? Why are you having a pop at that other guy's breakfast show? Because it's a war. That's what you do. No, not in Canada. Not in Canada. So everybody's terribly, terribly nice, which is
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
But apart from the Australians, and this is what happens all over the world. Australian radio is the most creative radio in the world. They're at the forefront. Anything that you see happening on UK radio happens because it happened in Australia a year before, right? They're at the cutting edge, the greatest announcers, the greatest programmers, everything. But what they then do is they then go off to like Canada and America and the UK, and they have a history of ruining radio in those other countries because they cost cut, they centralize and everything like that. So apart from the Australians in radio in Canada, everyone else is really, really nice. The problem is, and maybe this is part of that niceness, is it's very bland. Radio and TV in Canada, much blander than in the UK. There's not the same level of danger, of innovation. There's not the same characters. It's very, very safe. And I think that is why I, was able to rise so quickly here, because there's not really any competition. I'm going to stand out because of my accent, but I'm also going to stand out because everyone else is literally saying this same stupid shit about the weather every day and about some crappy, boring local thing that they went to. So yeah, it's nicer, but it's much, much, much blander. Like, for example, you'd Charlie Brooker. There's no way that that Charlie Brooker would be in Canada. You don't have a Canadian equivalent.
Yeah. And this may sound like a random question, but do you think it helps that you're Scottish as well, and maybe not directly English? Do you think that's helped?
Yes, Scottish as opposed to being English.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Especially in a place like Canada, where most of them think they're descended from Scottish people. Well, every single Canadian will tell you that they're descended from Scottish people, and so that's good. And traditionally, like all your big Scottish comedians will have sellout tours of Canada. The Proclaimers sell out Canada every year or two when they come here, coast to coast.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think that's definitely helped. Unfortunately, it turned against me recently because Canada, like UK radio did a couple of years ago, Canada is moving towards centralization networking, and they're closing down. Like now you're getting, like here in Calgary, one of the greatest rock stations in the history of Canada, Q107, who I worked for in Toronto, their morning show is a simulcast from Vancouver.
No.
And so there's all that stuff starting now. And I know, like, so 3 jobs recently that I've went for where I've been told they don't want a Scottish accent, because it's all getting centralized and it's all getting narrower and it's more music, less talk. And so now it's definitely, it's counting against me now, which is a shame because it's, I've had a great track record here, but.
Yeah, I think isn't that the American model as well? I think that's sort of the American model of radio, if I remember correctly. So sadly. Yeah. And, obviously you're doing a Twitch show, and how do you find that being different, kind of going out on your own and having more creative control as opposed to being part of something that has a clear process?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. It takes a while getting used to, because I will say things on the show and the little voice in my head will go, oh, you are going to get so much shit from the boss about that. And then I realized, well, no, there isn't a boss. It's just me. And so that takes a while to get used to. And it's great, the fact that you can just come up with an idea for a show and do it on Twitch. And there's all manner of stuff on there. It's not, it's not just the game streaming. There's talk shows. I saw some guy doing a big bingo show the other day on it.
Okay.
So, and that's brilliant. You don't have to pitch to TV companies. You don't have to wait, for 18 months in development hell. You can just go and do it, which is absolutely incredible. The downside is that you are on your own. So it's much harder to make money from it and to help it grow. So like there's all manner of things that I should be doing to promote the show, to get a bigger audience. I should be getting highlight clips and putting them together and ramming them up people's arse on social media. But the problem is I never look at stuff back that I've done or listened. I hate it. If I listen back to anything I do, all I see and here are false. So, and it's not uncommon. A lot of people are like that in this industry. So the idea of going through stuff and looking for highlights for me is so painful that I just keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And that's the thing I miss, is that what's great about working for a radio station or whatever is that someone else's job to market you, someone else's job to get the money in. And unfortunately on Twitch, it does all kind of come down to yourself, which is a harder of a slog. And that's how I guess that the people who make money on Twitch are probably, in terms of, they're probably 25% entertainment talent and 75% marketing talent.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing about the Twitch thing with you as well, and I think this ties back to your early work on GamesMaster as well, is you have a natural affinity to connect with fans, right? You did that over a TV screen and now you're doing it with Twitch. Obviously, Twitch is like connection with steroids. So how are you finding that? Do you know what I mean? The direct connection to your audience.
That is absolutely fantastic. That is the absolute best thing about it, is the 100% open, transparent, constant chat room. It is, I find it utterly exhilarating. I find it exhilarating for two reasons. One, it means that there's always a stimulus coming from that chat room to talk about something else, which is fantastic. And also, I really like the fact, and especially during the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns, that there are people from the different parts of the world that are broadcasted on, that are all coming together and are now actually, sometimes I look and they're actually bypassing me. They're just chatting directly to each other. Yeah. Someone in Canada and someone in the UK and whatever. And I think that's great. And I think that that's what I will do, like focus on much more. I think the more I'm on Twitch, it will be much more all about the interaction with people, as opposed to me just, telling a funny story or whatnot. But that's definitely the best bit. I've always, and it's weird because I honestly am the least, in real life, the least friendly, least sociable person in the world. I don't talk to anyone. I don't answer my door. I don't talk to my neighbors. I never have, right? I'm so complete. I am that grumpy old man now that lives on the street, that parents, tell their kids on Halloween, don't bother going to Mr. Diamond's house. He's a grumpy bastard. But it's weird that the minute I'm kind of, on a radio show or something, I really enjoy it. And I really love connecting to people that way. And I always have it. I mean, part of the reason for my success in Canada is like what I've done with listeners on telephones with radio shows and everything, and stuff that I've done on social networking and using texting and everything. So that for me is just it's just the best bit. And it's also really interesting because there are some people in the chat room from my hometown of Arbroath, and I couldn't wait to get out of that place when I was a kid. Like most people, like most working class kids, you want to get the hell out of your hometown because it just represents regression and you want progression.
Absolutely.
But I now feel the warmest I've ever felt about my hometown, because there's just these people, and people I haven't seen since I was about 12, probably.
Wow.
That are now watching the Twitch show, and I'm interacting, and I'm actually doing a lot more stories about when I was a kid in my hometown than I've ever done in my life, because I feel really connected to it all of a sudden, which again is a really strange thing because I'm on the other side of the world. But it's really nice. It's lovely. It's like I just the chat room for me on Twitch, it's like a blanket. It's just like a really comforting blanket to have there. I feel very supported by everybody on it, which is great when you're starting a new venture. And also it's the horrible thing about even live radio. You don't know, you say something, you do a show, and it's like, okay, did that work? Did that connect with people?
Yeah.
And then you have to wait to see if you get complaining letters, or you wait till the ratings come out. And what's great with Twitch is that I say something and I get an instant feedback and instant reaction from people.
Yeah, direct feedback. Yeah. And I guess the other thing is as well, given that added level of connection, how does it feel for you? Or, what do you think when you get for you, something like GamesMaster or the stuff you've done Paramount or, you know, Channel 5 or anything, that could be in your past, right? It's not something you think about day to day. But how does it feel when you get people bringing up stuff where you're like, how do you even remember that? Because I maybe don't. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, is it gratifying? Is it like, oh, you know?
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's great. It's brilliant to have done something that means something to people.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, okay. I mean, it would be nicer if it was a cure for cancer that I discovered, you know, rather than a video game show that had a lot of knob gags. You know, it's really interesting. There's a guy sent me a message on Twitter the other day, and this guy's a writer in the UK, and it almost made me cry, and it talked about how miserable and sad his childhood was. He was a working class boy, and like myself, he got a scholarship to a posh boarding school like I did. He was bullied relentlessly and was very miserable. And he used to watch GamesMaster. His parents couldn't afford a game console, so he watched the whole of GamesMaster without even having a video game system. And he just said, "You were the one thing in my childhood that wasn't horrible and wasn't miserable." And that is, how can you not think that that's remarkable? That is, you know, that's absolutely incredible. And so I don't mind it at all. I think it's great, and it also helps because, you know, the 90s for assorted addiction reasons are very much a blur to me. It's like you know, in fact, it's funny when I think back on the 90s, the thing I just remember is just parties. Every night, a different video games company with a different party. And for the likes of, you know, me and Frank O'Connor and everything, they just, you know, it was just great. It was just absolutely fantastic. So no, I think it's great. I think it's great that people remember it.
That's awesome. That is really, really cool. And I mean, you know, certainly one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because GamesMaster wasn't part of my life growing up. I probably wouldn't be doing what I do now, technology-wise. So it's kind of, wow. You know, you've touched a lot of people, which is kind of cool. Anyway, I'm not going to bromance. I'm going to go down another route. But so what do you think the future holds then for you and Twitch and, you know, your broadcasting career?
I don't know. I've said a few times on the Twitch show that we're going to be returning to the UK because the coronavirus has made us miss our families desperately, especially elderly members of them. The idea that because of the catastrophic clusterfuck in the UK and how they've mismanaged it, the very real reality is that my 70-year-old mother could die any day from this virus, and I wouldn't have been able to see her. So that's made us want to move back, which is a shame in a lot of ways because Britain's not a terribly nice place. That's why we left in the first place. There's too many right-wing xenophobic bigots, angry red-faced gammons. So I'm just not looking forward to that at all. But you know, family is family. So in terms of me and what I do, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy Twitch. I mean, I need to, you know, I can't keep on doing it without making money off it. I have to get a proper job at some point. So there will come that time where I'll be like, okay, listen, you know, I just can't do this anymore because I've got to get a proper job. And but what that job is going to be, my old agent I have in the UK is very convinced. Oh yeah, come back, you get tons of work. But I don't know if I want to do it. I don't. I've never enjoyed the kind of fame side or the recognition side of it at all. I've never been into that at all. I went into TV and carried on in TV and radio for one reason only, and that's to support my family and to do it for money. So I think I'd like to do, you know, like a proper job. I joked about it on Twitch. I'd love to be a beekeeper. I think we need more bees. That would be a fantastic job for me, a beekeeper. I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. I'd just have my bee suit on every day, sort out the bees, go home. I love gardening. I'd love to be a gardener. It's weird because these were all the things I was supposed to do when I came out to Canada. I was supposed to do these lovely new pastoral things, and I got sidetracked into radio, and then it just went a bit too well. So I got sucked into the media again.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess I'll make a token attempt to try and do something non-media when I get back. But I'll probably end up doing knob gags for money on some radio station somewhere.
Well, the beekeeper outfit could be season 8 of GamesMaster. That could totally be it.
That would be great. My God, that would just be like us, wouldn't it, if we came back? Yes, we're setting it in a bee colony.
The Borg mine, the hive. Yeah. Yeah. So who actually owns the rights to GamesMaster now, by the way? Do you know?
Well, it's funny. One of the guys in one of the Twitch followers, JT House of Pants, Jack Templeton, who was the first person to really have a website dedicated to the show, he got in touch with me recently because it's the 30th anniversary coming up in January of the show. And he's like, you need to do something. And he says the rights are, Future Publishing used to have the rights, and they had it for 10 years. And now the rights are owned by an independent television company who, like Future Publishing, have tried to bring GamesMaster back without me, without even getting in touch with me, and have failed, like Future Publishing did. And, hey!
Future Publishing, there you go.
There you go, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's some small production company in the UK that owns the rights.
Oh wow, okay.
I mean, it's people keep saying, oh, would you ever bring GamesMaster back? It's something I have no control over whatsoever. It's nothing to do with me.
Yep,
unfortunately.
And rounding things off, what would you say your biggest lessons learned in being in the media and front scenes and behind the scenes as well throughout your career?
Don't do cocaine.
Okay.
No, I'm not kidding. Don't do cocaine. Worst thing I ever did, destroyed huge portions of my life and my career. I had, immediately after GamesMaster, well, same time as GamesMaster, I was working for BBC Radio 5 Live, doing a sports phone-in that was called Sports Call that was really big. They offered me the world, the BBC. They were like, oh, do you want to host our main Saturday football coverage? Nah, fuck off, that's boring. I said to them, nah, it's fucking boring. Because I was fucking on coke. And what an idiot. What an absolute, I'd have been hosting Match of the Day. I mean, I genuinely would have been hosting Match of the Day if I'd not lost my kind of way with the BBC in a fit of white powder arrogance. So, the thing I have learned, and I think that's how I'm a very different person in Canada, in my media career in Canada than I was in the UK. In Canada, I'm so nice and so lovely. And in the UK, I was an arrogant prick. I would say, the thing I've learned more than anything is don't do cocaine.
Yeah. Well, it also seems on your Twitch show, actually, that you're very comfortable in your own skin now. Like, you don't mind talking about this stuff. You're just quite happy to just, it's there, it happened, I've accepted it. This is the advice type thing.
Yeah, I think that I think that's radio does that because radio is a much more intimate medium than television. You're kind of taught in radio to think you're talking to one person in their car, and so that encourages an intimacy, and I think that encourages the better radio people to be completely transparent and completely open. And I first of all did that on when I was on XFM Scotland in like 2005, 2006, and I spoke about depression and mental illness. I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I think I was one of the first people I think to talk about that on the radio. So, and that was it. And once I kind of opened that kind of door, and it was okay, and I felt good, and I had. It's interesting, when I was saying about that guy getting in touch with me through Twitter to say that I GamesMaster was the one good bit about his childhood. That's happened multiple times on radio. Every time I talk about my depression on the radio, I will have someone, at least one person, get in touch within a couple of days saying, because of listening to you, I've decided to go and get therapy, or I've decided to, tell my wife what I'm going through. And that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. And so again, I think with the whole drugs thing, it's difficult because, my mum's doesn't like me talking about,
of course,
about my drug past. And, but I do say to her, I say, listen, it's a difficult line to tread, because I will always preface any of my drug stories by saying, don't do cocaine, don't do classic drugs. They're really horrible, but they are great for stories. So it's a really fine line I have to tread with saying, this was hilarious, but, let me be the one that went through that so you don't have to.
I did it for you guys.
Exactly. I was the guinea pig for all your life's mistakes.
And what were your fondest memories of GamesMaster, and what sticks out to you now, looking back on it?
Foreign filming trips.
Okay.
Yeah. When the times we go over to America, because I think, again, like everyone in the UK as a kid, you love America. You dream of going there.
Yep.
It's the coolest country, at least it was, until, Orange Turnip in Chief took power. So yeah, those trips were amazing. The idea that, me, this guy from the small working class fishing town, is now in Hollywood, filming stuff for a TV show. They were absolutely, they were just, the foreign filming trips were just a riot. And they were one big party as well. But it was just, meeting, you got to meet so many really cool people. Dave Perry from Shiny Entertainment.
Not the other one. Yeah.
Driving around with Dave Perry in his, his open top car to Laguna Beach, and then going surfing, hanging out with Tommy Tallarico, the greatest video games music composer of all time, and now about to come out with his Amico games console.
Television, the Intellivision.
Oh, yeah. That is going to be brilliant. So just things like that, and I went to George Lucas's ranch. I went to the Lucas Ranch, for God's sake. I'd say, as a kind of kid that grew up on Star Wars, to actually be at George Lucas's ranch, how incredible! How utterly incredible is that? So, the foreign trips. And what was great was that Americans, and this is what we've forgotten about that country, unfortunately, because of the proliferation of the Make America Great Again rednecks, is Americans are lovely.
Yeah.
Americans are so nice.
Yeah.
And they're so kind. And unfortunately, I use that against them by ripping the piss out of them mercilessly on GamesMaster, So
coming back to that point about the harshness of the British media, so talked about earlier. So
So definitely the filming trips to America were just, they were the absolute highlight for me.
Yeah, and I always say here, one of the the greatest thing and the weakest point as well is the humanity here. You're kind of at the cold face of humanity, I think, in the US.
Yeah.
And that gets taken advantage of. So it is what it is. Well, Dominik, thank you so much. This has been wonderful and an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
I will leave you have the last words. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Once again, in case people didn't hear it properly, don't do cocaine.